and we are doing our first read along with the universe, and we have chosen Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. And just FYI, this is all spoilers. There is no spoiler-free anything. So if you have not read it yet, you probably want to at least read up to chapter 6. So this is where we are going to be talking about chapters 1 through 6, prologue through chapter 6. And the whole design of this is to read along with us. So if you haven't read it yet, get to chapter 6, come back and listen to our little discussion. All right, you ready?
I am ready.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to start off with our first responses to this book. So when I first started listening to chapter 1, I was instantly brought back with a deja vu moment of like I was in my first year of college reading this book and going through like a really bad breakup, and this was my way to kind of isolate myself and get sucked into a fantasy realm. And so I just had all of these strong emotions rereading the first chapter because I was brought back to that place, and how like Twilight, the whole story really kept me kind of grounded and had something to focus on. And my first knee-jerk reaction was I really was enjoying hearing this from Edward's point of view versus Bella's. What was your first reaction and thoughts too?
I found out about this book in May. I had no idea this was coming out. And I'm a teen librarian, so I got my finger on the pulse. I knew I used to work at Huntington Learning Center, which is kind of like Sylvan. I don't know if people are familiar, but it's where teens and kids go to get tutored. And most of these kids are not readers, which is usually why they have like low comprehension. They're just not used to comprehending stuff. And so my boss would often recommend Twilight to the girls, of course. She never did to the boys, but whatever. And that was the first time I learned about it. And that was probably like 13, 14 years ago. But I was not reading YA at the time. So I'm a reader. I've always been a reader, but I just was not reading anything much at the time because I was like going from job to job. And then when I became a librarian, it was like a movie and it was really popular. And so you kind of have to have parties about it. And so my coworker is like, well, let's have a Twilight party. But I'm like, well, I need to read the book first. And I got the first book, and it was one of those things where I was like, okay, one more chapter. And it's like 3 a.m. and I'm still one more chaptering. And I think I read the first 3 books in like 2 weeks. And these are pretty big books. So I was able to get through them pretty quickly. So I did enjoy them. I went to see all the movies. I was Team Jacob and all of this jazz. And so for this book, I'm just kind of, there has been some issues with the Twilight series, and Ashley and I will kind of get into that a little bit. And so what I'm looking for in this Midnight Sun series is to see if she's changed anything in her book to kind of, respond to the people who are having issues with it. And I would like more of Edward's family, or the Cullens. I want to learn more about them. I know they kind of got into them a little bit more in the books as they went on, but I would like a little bit more. I feel like we know everything about Bella, but nothing about Edward, except that he almost died during the Spanish flu. I feel like that's all we know. We got a lot about Carlisle just because the other books were about his, issues or whatever. But yeah, that's what I'm kind of looking forward to, hoping to see in the series.
Yeah, I have to agree with you because that's something that I was actually quite disappointed on. They spent all this time focusing on, Bella Swan and her whole story and everything like that. And they spent a lot of time, I feel like, on, the Indian tribes that were there. But it's like there was nothing on the Cullens. And I was like, we only get like snippets of them. And the most that you see of the Cullens, I feel, is when we finally enter into Eclipse, which is the 3rd book in the Twilight series. And it's like, oh, there's like a lot of stuff going on here. You get kind of snippets of like Rosalie and Jasper and Alice, but not really Alice. And I would like a little bit more Alice. I would like a little bit more Emmett as well. And Esme and the whole entire thing. So I'm really looking forward to getting more of a backstory on all of these interlacing like characters that we are introduced to and that are a huge part of the whole entire Twilight saga. Like, don't just give me the two that have fallen in love. I want to know more about everyone else because they share a role in this book that is just as good as Edward and Bella. And I remember my first response to Twilight was that I wanted to know what Edward was thinking in those moments where he could not hear Bella's thoughts. Mm-hmm. That was the one thing that I was like, what's going on? What's going on in there? How does he feel about that? You know, because like in the movies, all you see is him making this like weird face at her every single time and he can't like figure things out, you know, or his bloodlust is just like this weird, like cringe worthy. You're like, stop it. What? Ew. Like, so yeah, I'm looking for really wanting to know what Edward is thinking, his backstory, where he came from. We don't know anything else about him other than he almost died of the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah, those are my things. And, I agree with you. I hope that Stephanie Meyer was able to, address some issues that were brought up in the book. And to really kind of see where her writing has gone, because we were given the first 12 chapters of a draft of Edward's POV. Oh my goodness, like what was it? 11 years ago, 12 years ago or something. Like it was put up on her website and then it was never completed. And I remember I sat down and I read the first couple of chapters and I was like, this is like a whole other book. Just because it's told from someone else's POV. And I almost wish that we would have had Edward and Bella kind of going back and forth in the first book because we missed some very vital information, which we'll get into in our read-along. Yeah.
All right.
Moving on.
Yeah. So we read up to chapter 6. We were trying to read up to like page 250, but we don't have the book, and all we have is the book on our phones, and the chapter or the pages on our phone is not the same as the pages in the book. So we actually only really read up to like page 120. So that's our bad.
Please forgive us.
So from now on, we're going to go by chapters. So in the next podcast we do next week, it will be chapter 17 to 20. That's not right. 26. So if you're reading along with us, next week we will be reading chapters, 7 to 16. No. My bad. My bad. 7 through 16. That's next week's podcast. All right, Ashley, I'm going to let you take it away because...
Sounds good. Yeah. Okay, so we're getting into chapter 1. So my first thing that I have commented on is that Jasper is still struggling with his bloodlust for humans. And that was my first thing that I actually wrote down on my notes that I found interesting because we meet them in the cafeteria, okay, and Alice is trying to work through Edward, who is reading Jasper's mind, and Alice is trying to see the future, while as Rosalie and Emmett are, kind of going at it, trying to make sure that they seem more human inside this cafeteria, and like Jasper is like really bad struggling with bloodlust. And I found it interesting that Alice and Edward were a consistent pair where they constantly were leaning on each other's gifts to be able to protect the family and to protect everyone that's around them. My next thing that I had was like Edward, weird little quirks are explained better in this first chapter. I'm like, oh, well, that's why he's so, inward thinking, because he's constantly like hearing and listening to different things, and how he's like tuning out everyone else's like thoughts, and everyone's thoughts have a different tone to them, and their tone matches their voice somewhat, but not 110%. Because when you think about like hearing your own thoughts, I'm like, oh, wouldn't I have the same like tone as my outward voice? And it's a little bit different, which I was like, oh, I like that. You know, yet again, we're getting more of Edward.
Mm-hmm. So my first thoughts, I didn't catch, well, I caught everything you're saying, but I don't think I love the Twilight Saga as much as you do. So I'm not picking up on the same stuff you are. I'm picking up on totally different things. And what I picked up is that we are going to be in Edward's head for the majority of the book. I don't know how I feel about that. And he keeps, that's bad grammar. He keeps describing his bloodlust as a monster. It kept calling it a monster. And as someone who, like, we both read a lot of books, and as reading this from a critical point of view, to me, that's not nuanced. I've read that before. And so, I don't know. It just didn't feel fresh. I felt like the Twilight series was, with all the issues that it had, just put the issues that the book has aside, the actual words on the page, I feel like the book was written well because she did mix, Wuthering Heights in there, and she's got some Bible verses in there, and she's got a lot of themes going on. So she does have stuff happening, whereas so far in this book, I'm not getting any of that. And so, yeah, that's all I have to say about the first chapter. The only thing I noticed was the whole monster thing. He just kept mentioning a monster.
Mm-hmm. Which I thought was interesting as well, because I'm like, that's the thing you got for yourself, That's the unique term that you're going to use for this inner beast inside of you is the monster. Which, yeah, I don't know. And I still don't know how I feel about it, because I think it was in chapter 5 or 6 that he kept saying it, and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah. He says it a lot. I looked up, I looked at some time, it says the word monster, and it's quite a bit. I don't know. And this is Dawn, if I'm not with it today, it's because when I was taking my notes, I did not break it down by chapter. I just kind of did an overall thing. So if I'm a little scattered, it's because I don't remember what happened in each chapter, but I'm not going to do that in the next one. In the next podcast, I'll be ready. So that's what's going on there, if you're wondering what my problem is.
It's totally okay. I was, okay. So in the first chapter, they're going through their first encounter already.
Yeah. I'm looking at the book now as I'm like trying to familiarize myself, and he wants to kill her. Is that Alice's vision, that he was going to kill her? I was kind of confused on that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, because he literally saw himself going after her, because the bloodlust for her and the way that she smelled was unlike anything that he's ever had before. And so when I'm listening to it from his perspective, I'm literally thinking to myself, I'm like, isn't that called love, dummy? Like, you're drawn to her more than any other thing, human, whatever. But this particular human you are drawn to more. So it makes me think that it is in relation to, because he loves her, he doesn't realize that yet. Like it's like a soulmate thing. That's what I gathered from it. Because for someone to want to kill you because you're making them uncomfortable, if you will, this is very light terminology. And then all of a sudden you have this need to protect her because now she's been put into danger, and your first response is to protect versus kill. Then it makes me think like, okay, like you've found that, that one soulmate that everyone longs to find in, our universe, and he doesn't realize it yet.
he doesn't realize it, and so his way of expressing it is through Stalker.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't know how to handle it. He hasn't had a human emotion in so long. You know, he's been taught to, you know, blink every couple of seconds. Make sure you take a breath every minute, and make sure you cross your legs a certain amount of time, or blink, or whatever. You know, like when you die inside, because he's technically dead.
Okay.
You lose human emotion. I mean, you lose like the ability to like mourn for things or to love things. Like it's not a strong urge anymore. It's kind of muted. It's from what I've seen. And that's why like Bella turning into, you know, an immortal, when that does happen, the reason why she grieves the way that she does and how she feels is because she was you know, basically a monster with a human heart, if you will. She still has that.
Okay. So I don't recall so far in the book, but at any point does he kind of make that clear, that the reason why he acknowledges that he's a stalker at one point, and I'm going to get to that. But does he like explain to the reader that it's because I'm not human and I don't know how to behave like one, and no one's never taught me how to behave like one, and that's why I behave this way? Because I feel like Meyer should have said that, especially since one of the biggest arguments in this book is that he's a creepy stalker. I feel like if she had maybe explained that a little bit more, and maybe she will as the book goes on, we've only read to chapter 6, then people won't be so uncomfortable with that.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, when you're reading through his POV, it's like, oh, dude, you have major issues. Like, you're very sadistic, like, narcissistic, everything. Like, I don't want to be in love with you. That's what's going on in your brain. Those were my first, like, oh, stop it, stop. Why are you following her like that? But then it's like he has this shift, and I think it's, oh, goodness, I think it's like chapter 4 is when he has this shift, where he's like, so I can't stay away from her because I'm too pulled to protect her, so therefore I need to reason with myself on I can either kill her, get it over with, or protect her. So he kind of makes that switch, but it's very quick. It is a very quick switch. This is how I feel.
Okay. I still don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not explained, you know, where he says verbatim, like, oh, because I haven't been human in a long time, I don't really know how to be a human. Like, he doesn't have those words coming out of his mouth. It's more like he's reasoning with himself with his actions. You know, when he plays through each and every scenario in his head. I mean, if you want to really dig into that on chapter, I think it's chapter 1, where they get buddied up in science class, and he plays out how he would silence everyone in the room so he could enjoy killing her. You know, so it's like he's battling with like his inner self, if you will, constantly.
I feel like if Stephanie Meyer had have written that better, this would have made a better opening start for me, because to have this inner conflict between wanting to kill someone yet you're in love with them, like a love at first sight thing, is an interesting conflict, inner conflict, but I don't think she does it well, unfortunately. And I would have enjoyed the first 6 chapters a lot more if she had have developed that black and white issue going on in his head. I don't know, maybe not black and white is the best word for it, but that's a pretty stark contrast to have feelings about somebody. And all he does is kind of describe it as a monster. And I just want to kill her, and I need to go away because I want to kill her. And then now I have to protect her because all the other people want to kill her. And it's like, I just wish it had been written better. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it will be.
Maybe it will be. I mean, listening to you talk about it, it's definitely kind of changing the way I feel about it a lot. coming from the point of view as he's been a long time since he's been human. He doesn't know how to behave, and so that's why he does. So it is kind of changing my perspective of him a lot, but I wish he just had made it a little bit more clear. Like I said, maybe it comes up in the other chapters. As of right now, not as much as I would like for it to. Because if I missed it, teens are going to miss it. It comes across as Stalker.
Well, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, he has, and this is still my chapter 1 notes. I was shocked to find that Edward just craved her smell. It wasn't, he wasn't drawn to the fact that he couldn't hear her thoughts. Like, that's not what drew him to her. It was the fact that the smell of her blood was so overpowering that he just could not contain himself. However, there was one part in that first chapter where he struggled with the monster, if you will, but had this little moment where he yearned to protect her because she was so new. It was a small, little itty-bitty moment where he said, like, but I do also struggle with the fact that I want to keep her from Mike Newton, who's like a gross man that's, just loving on her, in his mind, and she has no idea. And so he has this, knee-jerk reaction to, I want to protect her from him because he's disgusting. And then you'll be like, have you heard yourself?
I have an issue with that too. Well, I don't know what chapter that's in, but it's not in chapter 1, so we'll get to that.
Okay, and then let's see. Oh, I did not realize that he could cut off his air to himself. So he literally holds his breath and stops breathing altogether to be able to withstand that 1 hour. That was weird to me because I was
they don't have to breathe. They don't even have to move. Like, they make them. So, and they make themselves blink and they make themselves go through human motions. So that makes sense.
I don't know. It does, but I was like, I wish I could do that.
You can breathe through your mouth.
That's not the same. He wasn't even breathing at all. Okay. That's all I had for chapter 1. And chapter 2 is Edward, basically fleeing the scene and telling everyone, like, I'm leaving. Goodbye. See you later. And he heads off to Iceland with the Denali clan, which is where are they in Iceland, correct?
I don't remember. I should, but I don't.
They're in a snowy area.
Okay.
And I thought that was really interesting because we get to see the relationship between Edward and Tanya, because Tanya has a little bit of a thing for Edward in the movies. You kind of get that reaction that they were ex-lovers at a time. And it turns out that they were not lovers. They were just really close friends. And that's all I had for chapter 2. So that was interesting to me because I was like, we get to see into the Denali clan, which we found out about the Denali clan book 3 or 4. So it's like there's that little snippet in there. That there's a little storyline for you. And then going into chapter 3, I found that it was very interesting that Edward could not make out Charlie's exact thoughts, per se. He got, like, a gist of the thought, but Charlie also has this weird haze over his mind as well, where Edward could not hear into his mind the same as other people, too. And I was like, it makes me think, like, is Charlie a witch or something? Like, because he's got supernatural powers that he just didn't know about either.
But Bella's not supernatural. She's just normal. So
no, but when she becomes supernatural, that power to block out people's minds from interfering with her brain is like huge.
Oh, okay.
She's not affected by anything other than brute strength, if you will.
I was just like, I hope Meyer answers that question. What makes her and Charlie so special?
Mm-hmm.
I guess we'll see.
My next thought was like, Edward couldn't let, Bella die. This is when she's getting run over by the car, and the way that Bella is depicted through Edward's point of view, she is a rather feisty woman. Like, she's not like this stupid, like, stuttering girl, if you will, that is just like trying to get into trouble, poking in different ways or whatever. Like, she is a well-read person. Like, she gets good grades. She's reading frickin' Sense and Sensibility, like, under a tree one day. She's not into the stuff that students of her age are. She's more of an older soul. And I felt like I was able to see that point of view of Bella. Whereas in the first book, she makes the comment, that her mom had said that she was born older. She's always like a 35 years past her time or whatever it is. And I didn't get that from Bella's character in the first book, but I definitely could get that from her character through Edward's eyes.
Okay.
Because she's like, I expect an explanation. You need to talk to me. I am not stupid. I saw your back imprint on this car. I saw you stop the vehicle. Like,
yeah, she did that in the first book too. So once again, you and I got something totally different from Bella, which I think is great.
That's
that
okay.
we're totally picking up some totally different stuff. I don't know. I think my notes come from different chapters. Yeah, so I'm not going to talk about it now. I felt like I was hoping Meyer was going to make Bella different in Edward's eyes than what the reader is often complaining about Bella. People often complain that she's moody and booty and wrapped up in Edward, and she doesn't have much going on. She's just kind of, her life is just centered around him, and she was like really reckless with her life because she wants to be with him. And so people were really like, they don't like Bella because of that. Mm-hmm. I personally thought Stewart did a good job portraying the person that was written on the page. It wasn't Kristen Stewart's fault. That's what was written on the page. So the stuttering and everything, that's how she was written. But I get that she was smart, but I don't know. She was smart she was smart in the Twilight series. And what I picked up on her, like I said, I'm not going to get into it in this chapter. I'll wait because what I have to say is in a different chapter. So,
mm-hmm. It's okay.
One thing I thought was really, so like when he saves her from the car and they're in the hospital and she wants to know what's going on and he's like, no, and she's like, tell me now. And I'm like, why can't he just say, look, this is a private between me and my family. I cannot tell you because it's going to cost us our life. And you're just going to have to accept that. I didn't like her being like, well, you need to tell me now. And I'm like, no, he doesn't. It's none of your business. Be happy that he saved you and move on with your life. It bothered me. It's like, just tell her to go away and mind her own.
I think it also had to play with like Edward's cues. He was just more of like, oh, I don't know if I can answer it. Like he kind of gave off that vibe. And so instead of being direct with her, because he was continuously wanting to spend time with her, because he's like wanting to talk to her, but not kill her, but still wanted to talk, to her. But I'm just like, yet again, I'm sensing that this pull, and he doesn't know how to say no to her. Like he doesn't know how to make her go away because he doesn't secretly want her to go away. So he's he's trying to use more like probing questions or more like beating around the bush type of answers to her. And it's like, hence why she's like, just tell me, like, you're still here. You're still watching me. Why are you still here? Why do you need to not be checked out? That's just how I felt about it. and I'm going to say this right now, like, I really enjoyed the Twilight books. So if I'm a little bit more excited and more like Team Edward, I've always been Team Edward. John is Team Jacob. So, you know, there will be moments where we disagree.
Yeah.
But my main thing that I got from chapter 3 was that in 80 years, since Edward's been turned vampire, okay, so in 80 years, you would think that he would have found someone that he cherished even a little bit, like to be close to. And what I got from him was more of like a Stefan Salvatore type of personality, where, so Stefan Salvatore is from the Vampire Diaries, and he like has a whole entire decade, if you will, where he's considered the Ripper. Okay, so he's just killing people just to kill people because he can't control his blood, thirst, and he has no connection to any women. And so, except for like his best girlfriend. And so that's what I'm kind of picking up with like Edward's style, is like, he's just been so focused on trying to maintain this bloodthirst and whatever, because he used to be like crazy about it. And, Carlisle has helped him curb his appetite to become vegetarian. So yeah, it's just really interesting to me that Bella continues to pull at his heartstrings, if you will. And then it makes me think like, okay, do vampires have mates as well? Is that what's happening? Vampires have mates.
Okay. I got nothing else from chapter 3.
Okay. All right. So chapter 4, they knew, so like the Cullens had like a family meeting, right? So they're all kind of sitting around like, dude, like you just put our whole entire family in jeopardy. We were wanting to stay here for another 6 to 7 years before people notice that we're not aging, and all of that stuff. And you throwing yourself in front of a vehicle to stop it from crushing this girl is not going to cause repercussions, right? So like, I really liked that whole dynamic that they sat down as a family and were like, dude, you're going to screw us all up. Like this whole idea of like having these family meetings, I think are so important and vital to a family dynamic, that like seeing it to the Cullens, I think it really shows like how close they really are. Like one person's actions, ripple into everyone else's lives. Yeah. And that's all I had for that.
Yeah. That's good. I got nothing else.
Okay. Yep. So chapter 5, my first response is, Edward doesn't like Mike Newton. I honestly had no idea that, that Edward was so repulsed by him. Like, sick boy thoughts. Edward was interested that it was interesting because he literally saw Bella lying about going to Seattle during like the homecoming dance or whatever it is. And he's like, you're not going to Seattle. Where are you actually going? And that was interesting to me because he's trying to read her body cues and her responses to other people as a way of reading her. So to me, that just really spoke to the fact that he's having to relearn how to pick up on like people's cues again, because he's always had to be able to read people's minds. So he can always think one step ahead as to how they're going to respond. And so that's why she's so alluring, is because he can't do any of that with her. He has to try harder. Hence why he becomes stalker-y. And he's literally trying to see her through the school day through other students. I'm like, what is happening? You just can't let her go.
No.
And then I put, is love causing him to make himself believe that he could keep her safe from the monster within? If his hate-hunger became a need to protect, could he truly protect and silence the demon within? That's what I got with all of his like inner monster dialogue. Is that what he was struggling with inside? Because I mean, that went on for pages and pages. It felt like him having this inner monologue.
I agree.
So, and then chapter 6.
Oh, wait. So I have stuff to say about chapter 5. So this is where I started to break my notes down into chapter. For some reason, I started with chapter 5. I don't know why. Okay, so like I was saying, that one of the issues with the original series is that people did not like his stalker behavior. And so I kind of wanted to see how Meyer like reconciled or justified his behavior. And all she kind of really does is like he acknowledges it at somewhere. I don't know if it's chapter 5 or what, but he's just like he acknowledges that he's being a stalker. But in my opinion, just because you admit something, that doesn't absolve your behavior and then give you license to just keep behaving that way. So, and when you were saying that he was watching her like throughout this, like listening to people around her to kind of get a sense of who she was because he can't hear her. This book, in a sense, made him even more of a stalker. So instead of like trying to like, I said like so many times, because readers took issue with the whole stalker thing, she's making him even more of a stalker, and she's not like making it less. Because he's now listening to her conversation, her conversation with her friends at the table, and it just makes it even worse. Let me see. Oh, okay.
You're right. It is chapter 5 because that's when he like is going through that whole entire thing, and I'm like, bro.
Yeah. So when they're at I don't know where they are. Oh, I think Tyler asked her to the dance and she said no. And so he says in his head, if Tyler misses his chance to ask Bella to the dance at a later date, I had no way of knowing the outcome. It's like, I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. Another thing, so this is where I was talking about with Bella being a different person in this series than she was in the original series. And I felt like this was Stephanie Meyer's opportunity to make her into a, I don't know if better character or maybe a just more developed character is a better term for it. And so I get the whole thing that she's like smarter in this. You said she's a little smarter in this book, or she is written to be a bit smarter and a little bit more feistier. I can see that. And then Edward, in the first book, it was really apparent that Edward was really attracted to her because he couldn't hear her thoughts. So that was like the one thing we could take away because we were never in Edward's head and now we are in his head. And what he seemed to be attracted to is that she's compassionate. So like they're at the lunch table and they're talking about Comic-Con and she kind of like takes up for another character. And all he can come up with is that she's kind and compassionate. And I'm like, that's it? I felt like that wasn't enough. But if there's a love at first sight thing, that's different. That adds a different dimension to the story. But on the surface, it's more of, I told her a story about, that might be chapter 6, never mind. But in chapter 6, he tells her a story about his parents and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And he's like, oh, she's so compassionate. I love her. What? Like, many people are compassionate. And I don't know if they made the Jessica character some vapid hound. Like, she was just, I recall being, I don't remember much about Jessica in the first books. But if the two women that she's surrounded with is Jessica, who is vapid and jealous, and then the other girl who's insecure and like awkward, then of course Bella looks better. I don't know if that's making any sense, but my point is I didn't find her very interesting. I don't think so far Marissa Meyer is taking the opportunity to make Bella a more interesting character. She's still pretty Mary Sue, very Mary Sue right now, and kind of a wet blanket. If it's a love at first sight thing, sure. But if it's something else, I don't see what's so great about her. So that was my thoughts on Bella in chapter 5. Also, the whole Mike Newton thing. If I recall, Mike Newton in the first series was a pretty good guy. I'm not sure why Marissa Meyer, wrong author, Stephanie Meyer. Not sure why Stephanie is trying to like just assassinate his character. He's described as crude, and so Edward can hear his thoughts. He's very like, he's described him as crude, and he is like picturing Bella sexually, which I'm not trying to say that that's okay, but that's human nature, especially for boys their age, to think about girls or boys sexually. As adults, we do that. We fantasize about other people sexually. But is he acting on that? Is he abusive? Is he like taking advantage of her? No, he doesn't do that. I remember him getting jealous when Jacob comes to the movies with him. I don't know if that's in the book and the movie, but I remember that being in the movie. But that's the only time I really see Mike kind of like, ew. And I don't think it's fair to say, ew, he's fantasizing about her and that's just gross and wrong. Yet he's standing in her bedroom watching her sleep. Like, I can't like, I can't be okay with that. People are going to think sexually about other people. That's, you know, I don't know what the study is, but they say that men think about sex umpteen times a day. Women is a little bit lower, but it happens. And it's not a bad thing. It's just what humans do. It's just how do you act on that? If you act on that, then that becomes a problem. But just thinking about it, I'm not going to say he's a horrible human being because he's thinking about her sexually. Kind of had a problem with that. That's all I had about chapter 5, I believe.
Yeah, I will say, I got similar vibes with everything that you were saying as well, because my first reaction was with Jessica. Jessica's an annoying ditz with big tits, okay? Like, that's just who she is in the first book. And you kind of get that vibe from her every single time she opens her mouth, and it's like, okay, like, you are just not getting it. You're not a really, bright girl. And Angela, who is the other friend, she is this more quiet, timid, sophisticated girl. That's kind of the vibe that I get. And I'm like, why are both of these girls friends? Because they are two different personalities, like literally on opposite playing fields here. And so Bella comes in, and Bella's kind of a ditz, but she's also smart. So that's why I think she molds into that group in a weird way, is because she's got a little bit of both of that. But it also just, I don't know, like, I think we're going to see it later on in the chapters that, like, we get more as to, like, why Edward is drawn to Bella versus just she's kind and sweet or considerate. Because at first I was like, that's all you got to say about her. If my husband just told me, oh, you're kind and sweet, I'm like, really? What else am I good at? Like, you can't just describe someone with two. The whole Mike Newton thing made me upset, and the Tyler thing also made me upset, because these guys are 17-year-old guys. Like, of course they're thinking about sex and sports. That's what they do. Like, that's
the title of the podcast.
Sex and sports. I mean, that is what they do. So, and because Edward was born in such a different era, he is not thinking that way, and he's lived his life. He's out of the hormone, their sex drive's racing, and they don't know what to do with themselves, and there's just all these emotions happening, and he's critiquing them based on their inexperience, and also based on their lack of, like, maturity, I think, is really and truly what it is. But I didn't like it because Mike's a good guy. Mike is your average 17-year-old guy that wants to ask the new pretty girl out to the dance, is kind of the life of the party. He doesn't really do anything bad other than like her, or think about her in a derogatory way, right? So that's the first thing where Edward's like, oh no, because how he was raised is that you court a woman before you marry her, right? And it's like, there are these outings that, they're supervised outings, so you don't do stuff like that. So it's like, of course, Edward's going to be like, what is going on in this gross pig's mind? But that's how they think, and it just makes me realize, like, do you not read into people's minds enough to care until that moment? And it's like, Tyler's entitled to his opinions, and his thoughts, because they're his thoughts, like you said, you don't act on them. Those are your thoughts. You can have them. How you handle your thoughts is a different story, but it doesn't make him a bad character. It's just like, so what if he wants to ask her out? What's the problem? And so, like, yeah, Edward is written extremely stalkerish because he doesn't also understand the culture. He's still living, during the Spanish flu epidemic. Like, that's where his brain will always be, along with Carlisle and, Rosalie and all of them. Like, they're still living in their eras where it's like, this isn't modern day here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think chapter 6 is still more stalking, correct?
Stalking.
More stalking, and Bella faints at blood during the, one of their labs or whatever that they had to do. And I found that was weird because I don't remember her doing that the first time.
I do. Wait, what happened? I remember them doing labs and looking through a microscope. Well, in the movie. I've seen the movies more than I read the book. So sometimes things in the movie don't happen in the book.
Yeah, no. So I think it was in the book, but it was another lab scene, and he is sitting out, because he still didn't want to face her or something weird because they were doing blood work or whatever in the lab class. So of course he's like, I'm going to skip out because I can't, do this class today. And she's like, oh, well, that's dumb. And she faints. And I was like, why is she fainting at the sight of blood? That's weird. I don't know. It just seemed like a trait that was not consistent with her. But maybe I missed something.
I wish I knew the books better to answer that. But I thought that was weird too. I was like, I don't recall her fainting in class. I don't remember that, but you can't go by me. I only read the books once.
Well, yeah. And then I did like the fact that Rosalie, we get more of like Rosalie and Emmett's like love story. They were a love at first sight encounter. Whereas Alice and Jasper, we learned that Alice was having visions about Jasper 28 years before they were united with each other. And she was like sending things like back to him so he was able to find her. It was really interesting to me because I'm always, curious as to like, well, how did they find each other or whatever? Alice and Jasper definitely had a type of meeting that I would expect from someone who's able to see the future. So yeah, those are my final thoughts on chapter 6.
So what about overall the first 6 chapters? Did they meet your expectations?
I think the fact that I like breezed through it so quickly is a testament to the fact that I was craving a good vampire story, if you will, because all I could think about was us reading Crave by Tracy Wolff and how much even better, this book is versus that whole Crave story. And this is a retelling in a different POV, So it was baffling my mind at the fact that Stephanie Meyer still had enough of a way to draw you into the story the way that she did. Because I was expecting us to like enter into the story like pre, where are they at? Washington or whatever they are.
Forks.
Forks, thank you. Pre-Forks. I was expecting us to get like dropped into the columns like as they're approaching Forks or whatever, and the fact that they were the first scene is them in the cafeteria at school. I was like, oh, okay, I could do that. So those are my thoughts.
What are you like? If the book ended now, what would you rate it?
Ooh, that's a very interesting question. I would say as of right now, I think I would give it a 3.5. That's what I would rate it. What about you?
Well, here's my issue. I tend to not like books in this POV where we're in the main character's head the whole time. In my opinion, if I'm going to be in a character's head, this person better be witty or charismatic or funny or insightful or have something very interesting to say. And so far, all we're getting is stalker behavior, and she's tasty, and he's trying to kill her and not kill her. And I'm not interested in Edward and what he has to say. So far, we're in his head a lot, and I don't want to hear it. It's a lot of repetition, and it's not like a beautiful prose. Like, if you're going to be in someone's head, they better be a beautiful speaker and thinker, because we're going to be in his head for 700 pages. So he better have something interesting to say. And so far, he really doesn't. And it's really bumming me out. I can honestly say I was really bored, and I am not enjoying it at all. So this is going to be an interesting podcast where you are really liking it and I am not. I think this is the first time that we are on opposite ends of the spectrum as far as liking a book. Right now I would give it a 1. I'm not enjoying it at all. She's not so far, at the beginning of the podcast, I talked about how there were some issues with this book, and like the stalker behavior was a problem. People were saying that it was a lot of misogyny. Bella's behavior, I believe it passes the Bechdel test, but just her obsession with him is a problem. The Native American culture is a problem. So I on chapter 7, I think she actually goes to La Push, and we probably meet Jacob. So I stopped right at chapter 7. So I'm curious to see if she is still going with this Native Americans are savages and dogs thing. Hopefully she cleans that up. I'm just hoping she cleans up some of the issues that she's having with people. Like, people are literally like saying, instead of buying this book, donate your money to that tribe that she's like taking advantage of. Like, people are almost to the point of cancel culture with her. So I'm hoping that I'm sure she knows this, and I'm hoping that she turns it around, that she fixes it somehow. This is her, and I haven't gotten there yet, so I have no opinion on that.
Yeah, and I'll be interested too, because so far I haven't gotten that vibe, with the Native American culture and stuff like that. And I'm just like, okay, like, I'll be interested to see how that is either touched on or taken out, or, how are we going to handle this? Because so far we have not met any of the blacks, right? We haven't met anyone from that family. So, and because they, I don't know. Yeah, no, they haven't even mentioned anything about the treaty or anything like that. So I'm just kind of waiting to see if that's going to happen. I think my overall, take on the first 6 chapters was, I think I was reliving my like 18, 19-year-old self. And it was like, I think that's why I was so like giddy to keep reading, is because I was reading something that was a major like part of my life at that time. But as I'm like dissecting it as well, I'm kind of like, Edward, you're a little creepy. Because I read books more critically now. So it's like, before, it's just like you're reading all of the feels, and you're just getting into young adult, right? And this whole fantasy realm, you're excited about the world, and you're like, ooh, are they going to make it out in the end or whatever? And you're not really picking up on all of these other like cues in the books about the characters, or the timing, or the innuendos. And then when you break it down, it's like, oh, I don't know why I love this book. Maybe I just love the experience. I didn't really love the whole process of the story. But I really hope Edward, I guess, creative side, that's just how I saw him in the first books when I first read about him, was Edward is this silent, creative person who, writes this beautiful music, and he's waiting for the right girl and all this other stuff. And I'm just getting a lot of stalker vibes, I think I'm trying to like stand up in his corner, but I don't know if I'm going to be up in his corner for too long.
Yeah, I mean, in the first book, he was Stalker, but it wasn't that bad. It was bad because I believe we saw him in her room. Yeah, and then like she gets into a bit of a jam with some guys and he comes to save her. But because it's told from her point of view, she's not really looking out for him. But now that it's told from his point of view, it's like he is with her all the time because this is about their romance. And so Meyer has to get them together. She has to keep them together before they start dating. When they start dating, they're probably together all the time. But up until that point, she has to be in the story somehow. So the only way she can be in the story is by him watching her. And as I go into chapter 7, I'm like, oh God, he is going to be there while she's at La Push, and he's going to see her with Jacob, and then I'm going to have to freaking hear about it. And I am not looking forward to that chapter because I know he's going to be there. I'm just like, oh my God, here we go. So in the original series, we saw some Stalker vibes, but you were able to kind of get over it because it's like, it's creepy, but there are so many other good things going on that it's not, I can look past that. How I moved the whole Native American savage thing, I don't know. I was not a teenager when I read this book. I was in my 30s.
I missed it. I missed it 100%. So when we were talking about it, I was like, was I really that dull? And just completely like tunnel visioned or something to miss this theme?
So I'm Black, and sometimes I am able to pick up on the oppression of other races. And so I'm not Native American. I don't know like their struggle, but I know how it feels to be a brown person in America. And I should have been able to pick up on that, but I just didn't. And I'm like, and once again, I was in my 30s and I did not pick up on that. And I was like, was I blindsided by the hotness of Jacob? What the hell, Dawn? Like, what is that?
I know.
For not catching that. So I catch it in other books like a lot, but even back in the day I would catch it in other books, but I just totally didn't catch it in this one. So yeah,
I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see.
Yep, we'll have to see. Well, thank you for joining us for the first 6 chapters of Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, and we will catch you in the next podcast.
Bye-bye.